So today's one of the issues that came up is with listing fees. As you know, since the change last year, some companies has decided to not collect the listing fee, but also refuse to pay us a listing fee. And some of you have asked me, how do I enforce it? Because if my seller is paying a commission and I choose to, request $200, $250, $300, $100, how do I enforce it with a company that is saying that their policy is that they're not going to pay it? You have to do it from the beginning. This is why the cooperation, a broker to broker cooperation agreement was put in place. So how do you enforce it? If you have a listing that you have multiple other offers, you can do it from the beginning. When you're requesting how to submit, for them to submit an offer to you, you can say, in order for me to present this offer to the seller, you need the following documents: offer, proof of funds or pre-approval, seller disclosure from the beginning, lead paint if it's required on your listing, whether it was built prior to 1978, and the broker to broker cooperation agreement. You can make that as a requirement for them to submit an offer. Where do you add that? Under agent remarks. You can easily just say that. And if somebody presents you an offer, it is your responsibility to make sure that they have added the listing fee. If they didn't, you can go back saying, hey, you're missing out the listing fee. In order for me to present this to my seller, this is what the fee structure is, whether it's 2%, 3%, minus 200, 250. That's the only way you're going to be able to enforce it. Just this last week, I don't know if the two agents that I helped this week are on this call and they want to volunteer. One was on a rental, one was on the sale. If they submit an offer to you and they didn't add the 250 or whatever the listing fee is, and they tell you like, oh, just add it, you must have the buyers or the tenant initial it. You can't just change the contract. It has become at that point a counter offer, and it won't be enforceable unless you have it initialed. Yes, Mary.
I just wanted to add, because same thing happened with my agent, that the attorney put it in his rider or addendum that the buyer will not pay anything beyond the 2%, and we missed it. So we were going back and forth during commission statement, and we're like, hey, we have a listing agreement that says it. I sent it to you in a text. The agent didn't review the contract. It didn't have that on that contract. But what trumped it all was during the attorney review that a buyer's attorney wrote that, and we couldn't say anything
So
because we signed off on all of that.
was the buyer paying the commission or the seller?
The seller.
So if you missed it from the beginning, where if they just listed a 2% and you didn't review it, unfortunately, at that point, it doesn't count, right? Because you didn't catch it from the beginning. Usually attorneys don't get involved with commissions. So I'm
That's
kind of,
why I was so surprised. So I'm just saying for
yeah.
the agents to take a look, and you have to review what's going out there for signature.
I have a question
Yes.
on that. So I had a similar situation where they changed something, like literally crossed it off and then sent it back, but it hadn't not been initialed or anything. This with one of my agents, it hadn't been initialed or anything, but I don't know, they changed it, and let's say they changed it from 3% to 2%, but they didn't initial. They literally just like whited it out and changed it. So you wouldn't. I just flabbergasted by that. But what we were able to do was we sent when it was closing, we sent the title company. We said the buyer has agreed to pay 3%. The contract has 2%. Charge the buyer 1%. Can you not do that? Like, you still have a separate agreement with your buyer for whatever they signed on for. And so, unfortunately, that buyer had to pay the difference. The agent got paid. So I'm just curious if that makes sense, or if
Yes,
that was
but
okay to do. That's what we did.
the contract would have been invalid, because if you have, this is why you need the broker to broker cooperation agreement. You want to have that signed, which kind of guarantees you that, let's say I'm assuming we're on the buyer side, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you have sent the offer with a cooperating broker agreement where you say, hey, the seller is going to pay 3, if that was signed, then they would have had to pay you the 3. But because that wasn't done, now they changed the contract. I'm kind of surprised that the agent was not aware that they were changing their commission from 3 to 2. That should have been, you know, us, like sometimes we feel like once we pass it to the attorney, we feel like, oh, we're safe, let's move on, we just care about going under contract. Now it's more important than ever for you to review what those attorneys are adding and removing, especially when it comes to your compensation, because that's the only way you can stop it, saying, wait a second, that's not what we agreed. And that's when you have to get on the phone with your client saying, hey, what's happening? This was the agreement. I'm glad that the buyer said, hey, I'll pay the extra 1%, because if I was the buyer, I would be like, hey, it was changed to 2%. I'm assuming the seller side changed it to 2.
Yeah, well, it was weird because they put in the offer at 3%. The buyer signed that, right? And then we sent it to them. We had an offer and acceptance, and then we sent it to the seller to sign, and the seller signed but changed it 2%. You can't change it without all parties acknowledging the change and initial, but they whited it out. It wasn't even like it was. So you're not thinking to go back and check what someone has, you know what I mean? They should have just signed it the way that it was. But I just, things like
Yeah,
that
so
are,
so
Did
at
the-
that point, it would have been a counter offer, but if I was on the
Right.
buyer's side, if the seller signed a contract, sent it back to me, I would check to make sure they didn't change anything. At this point, you have to do that extra
yeah.
step to make sure that nothing else was added or removed from the contract. And technically, it could have been, it is considered invalid contract, so it would have been, this whole deal would have just been for nothing, right? But I'm glad that the parties negotiated and they were able to get the extra
I'm
percent.
just curious if Kenya, if your agent submitted the cooperating brokers compensation form along with their documents, because if the agent initially told them it was 3%, then they should have completed the cooperating broker compensation form along with that. And then if there's a real question about what the seller was going to offer, depending on the MLS, they can request the copy of the listing agreement from the MLS.
Sometimes
Now,
they don't send those back, right? Like it's weird. Have you ever sent a contract? It's all in one thing, and then when you get it back, it's just the 13 pages of the contract. They didn't send it back. But like you said, you just have to check and double check. It's just it's crazy. You submit an offer and this is what it has in it, and then you get it back and they've changed things, and we just have to be more vigilant, I think, is what is the lesson there.
So the two issues that came up, I was able to get the listing fee for our agents, and one of them was, you know, the agent was on the seller side, our agent was on the listing side. What happened is they're like, hey, you didn't add the listing fee on the contract. They verbally communicated with the buyer's agent. They're like, oh, you can just add it, I don't want my client to re-sign it. So our agent added the fee, then had her clients sign the agreement, and then when it came to closing, they're like, oh, the buyer never agreed, the buyer never initialed the change. So I was able to like get the listing fee because I said, okay, well, and then it's an invalid contract and the buyer's not going to get the house. Like, it's easy as that. You know, that's, I respect your policies, but we also have policies. And if there was any issues with the contract, then your agent should have checked during attorney review. They did it. They didn't remove it. So it's there. This is what the fee is. But we learned a lesson. If you make any changes, whether you're on the buyer side, listing side, you have to get it initialed, because we're seeing this more often than we did before. The listing fees are becoming more of an issue than they were before. Now, if you have a listing that's been sitting on the market for months and you only get one offer that they don't want to pay the listing fee, are you willing to lose that offer for 200 or 250? Probably not. I would hope you don't risk losing that offer if that's the only one you have for your property. So that is the only way you're going to enforce it, is from the beginning, being clear as to what you need in order to submit the offer to the seller. And what I would tell my seller if they ask me, oh, what is this $200 fee or 250 or 300, whatever, I say this is a marketing fee, which I use to pay for my photography and some marketing that I do on social media. So I ask that the buyer's agent reimburse me at closing. And they're like, oh, okay. So that way you can say, look, for them to submit an offer, this is what I'm going to request. Please sign off that in order for me to submit a valid offer to you, we need the following documents. So that way, if a buyer's agent tells you, well, you have to submit my offer the way it is, you can say, this is the agreement between the seller and I, where you need to submit the following documents in one email for me to forward it to the seller. Otherwise, it's incomplete at that point. And in the beginning, we were like, oh, here we go, another form. Well, the cooperating broker to broker agreement is now becoming really valid and important. And I know I see a comment that says, I can't believe attorneys are being involved with our commission. Yeah, that's why it's important to use preferred attorneys, those that work with us, so they are aware of how we operate. Because if you're using an attorney you've never really worked before, you're gonna see this issue because they don't know you. They don't care if they're not gonna get more business from you. And the way, of course, some clients have their own attorneys, etc. I would just have a phone conversation with that attorney saying, hey, look, and I would tell my buyer or seller saying, I get it, you want to use your own attorney, but this is the agreement between you and I. So whatever you do, you can't really alter the contract without talking to me first. So that's one. The other thing I wanted to bring up is getting coverage for your showings. So during the summer, I think we get the most requests where agents are looking to get coverage for showings, or sometimes you're helping a client that's kind of far in distance, you're not willing to do the drive. I do want to say that sometimes, like when we want to look for local agents that can show a property, you are taking a risk by losing that client. So if you are covering somebody, you're getting paid to show a property for somebody, the goal is for you to not really have a full-on conversation with the buyer. The goal is for you to open the door, allow them to look at the property. Any questions they have, you kind of have to respectfully say, hey, you have to ask your agent. I don't know the information, because what goes around comes around, right? You don't want somebody to be having deep conversations with your client and then they realize that this agent is more informed, they have more knowledge about the town than the agent you've been working with. And sometimes you don't know that agent has been working with a client for many months. They've been changing locations. So it's also not fair on that agent. So if you are covering somebody's client where you're showing properties, just please remember that to respect the other agent that's paying you to show the property, and vice versa. You are taking a chance. Just remember, if you're willing to say, hey, I want to find a property for this client all over New Jersey, and you're not willing to drive the 1 hour, you are taking that risk. Just remember, if you're paying somebody to show a property, the buyer, maybe that agent will not want to take the client because we're in the same company, but the client will still fire you because they're going to say, wow, like I do want to find a local agent that's aware of this area. Like me, I wouldn't be able to sell something in South Jersey or in Princeton area because I'm not familiar with it. And that's also not fair to your client. But it could also happen in the same town that you work with, if they hit it off. So just please just be both sides. If you're on the side of you sending somebody to cover for you, or you're covering for an agent, just we work in the same company and we work really hard with our clients, and we want to make sure that we're not trying to take somebody's client. Anyone have anything to add to that? Yeah, I love working with all of you because, we are very professional into that aspect, but it does come up, and I just want to make sure that we remind ourselves, like, if you are covering for somebody, to please don't sell yourself to that client. It's not fair to your colleague. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is our fiduciary duty to our clients. So when you are representing a seller or buyer, they may be sharing a lot of information with you. Those are private conversations you have with your client. If they decide to walk away from you, or you end up helping them find a property and it closed, or you sell their property, you still need to keep that information they shared with you privately. You cannot, even with me, you shouldn't really be sharing that information. So we have to remember if they share any financial issues they have, you can't go ahead and, let's say you have a listing and the sellers, you know, that you listed the property, overpriced the property. Let's say now it's 550 instead of 500. You get somebody who calls you, even if it's within an ARC or company, and they say, "Oh my God, this house is like overpriced," and you can't really tell them, "Oh, well, they're having financial issues, so even if you offer 500, they'll take it." You can't do that. Okay, so just remember that you need to keep that unless your seller says, "Hey, I'm accepting any offers," you can tell them that I'm willing to negotiate and take a lesser offer. You can't tell them. Or vice versa. If you have a buyer and they're submitting an offer for 500, but you know they can go to 530, you can't tell the listing agent like, "Oh, my client will go up more," because of course they're going to counter. So you have to remember our fiduciary duty to our clients. One thing that I have come up with an issue is, and I think I mentioned it last time, if you have a listing and you know it's overpriced and you don't know whether or not it's going to sell in that price range that you decided to list it, and you feel like, "Hey, I'm putting the money up front for marketing, so for photos, uh, putting on the MLS," if you don't have it in writing where the seller reimburses you, you can't go and ask them for money back if they decide to withdraw the listing because it's not selling for that price point. The way I did my business is, if somebody was way off on the pricing, I didn't take the listing because I don't want to be that agent that is known to be listing overpriced properties and then they get withdrawn, or it doesn't sell or have price reductions. I don't want to be that agent, and neither do you. You don't want to be, the word gets spread out so fast. So sometimes it's better to take a loss, not take it, because realistically, you're respecting yourself enough to say, "I'm not going to take an overpriced property knowing that it's not going to sell and we're going to need to reduce it within 2 weeks." Sometimes if it's like 5, 10,000, fine. But if it's more than that, that's just, especially now with the market shifting, it's not worth it. And sometimes it's okay to walk away. I know we're all desperate, like, "Oh, we'll take the listing and we'll convince the seller to reduce the price." You don't want to have, sometimes when I'm looking to recruit agents, I go and see what kind of agent they are, what kind of production they've done. And if I see all overpriced properties, and they have reduced the price on all their listings, like, that agent probably needs a lot of coaching and help with pricing properties. And then if you want the seller to reimburse you for photography in the event that they decide to withdraw the listing, they don't want to sell, you want to get reimbursed, you have to have that signed on the listing agreement saying, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, part of my marketing pitch is that I'm going to pay for, uh, you know, all the marketing materials, whether that's doing the full package, which includes the 3D tour, the video, the photos. But in the event that you decide to cancel our agreement, due to your own personal reasons, you're going to have to reimburse me for me paying these costs up front. But in the event that it does get closed, then, obviously you don't have to reimburse me. You have to have that in writing in order for you to be able to request the money back." Let me see, there's a question. How can you start the conversation of getting the reimbursement from the sellers? That's very easy. You could, just like what I just mentioned now, you can say, "Hey, I'm going to be investing at least $500 from day one of me taking your listing. This cost would be paid by me, but in the event that you change your mind on selling your property, or if you're taking it an overpriced listing, in the event that you change your mind that you no longer want to sell this, you will be reimbursing me." And I would have them sign off on that. I would just say that in the event that this contract gets voided by seller due to their own reasons before the expiration date, the seller agrees to reimburse agent this amount of money, whatever that fee is. Fran, would you add something else besides that? Any recommendation, Mary, Yakenya? Sophia, like, I just feel like if you don't have it in writing, it's hard for us to go back and say, pay us to release the listing.
I, my feeling about that is just a little bit different. Like, I agree that it's good to have it in writing, but if you do that, sometimes they feel, oh, if I want to cancel the listing, I can cancel the
know.
listing, you know? So it's like a catch-22. It just depends. I have had people that want to be withdrawn from listings, and I've actually worked out an hourly rate and I've submitted a bill to them. And if they want out of a listing for any reason, I said, that's fine. You reimburse me almost like $3,000 on one of them, you know, because your time is money. And I think you need to make sure people know that. I like your idea of doing that because it is an option. I just don't like the idea, like maybe tweaking those words a little more, like if you need to, if you need to remove the listing, please know these are the fees that you have incurred, and it will not be released from the MLS agreement. It will just be taken off the market. Like, let them know that it's still an agreement on the MLS, even though they're taking it down, right? Your contract is still there. I don't know. What do you think, Adona?
I like that. I agree. I mean, we don't want to make it sound like, oh, they can change their mind. But a lot of times, I would say 90% of people that are ready to sell their house, they're not changing their mind. I guess it's for those that who tells you like, oh, if I get this price, I'll sell my house. If not, I don't care. I'm not desperate to sell it. Like, those are the type of people that I would be very cautious, because we work with some sellers that way. They tell us, oh, I just want to test the market, see if I can get this price for my house. You want to make sure that those people are not desperate to sell it, or they don't have to sell it. And then I would definitely want to get something in writing that says, maybe you're right, maybe tweaking the words, saying like, in the event this contract gets canceled prior to the expiration date, the agent gets reimbursed for all the marketing expenses paid up front, something like that.
I think
Had
I
a
was gonna
sense.
just say
Oh,
this.
go ahead.
Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead. No, go ahead,
No, no,
Mary.
you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in general, I agree, because I think the $500 or whatever the actual cost is not, it's like all the work that you do, whether you, I mean, I kind of personally would property manage it. This is what you need to do. Here's my list of, my whole Rolodex of people that, you need to do it. So you're doing way more than the actual dollar amount. So in the event that you cancel this contract, but prior, or in the event that, something, before, prior to the expiration date, then you will reimburse costs up to $3,000 or something like that. Just something more general, because I also don't want them to think that all that they have to do is spend $500 and it's bada bing, bada boom, and it's done. It's so much more than that, as we all know. So
I mean, I agree. You know, I think that sometimes it's probably better to not take the listing, because then you're kind of leaving them with this message like, okay, I'm going to take it and then you're going to pay me. So it may cause, it's better to just lift it or get the listing and really have that serious conversation, that maybe having a price reduction form signed in advance and say, hey, we'll try it for this amount of weeks, but you're losing valuable time when you do that. However, we can have a, like, let's say, a price change reduction form signed in advance, so that you're really, setting up the expectation that, that's not really the market price at this point.
Right, I agree. Me personally, I wouldn't take an overpriced property, just because I don't want to be known as the agent that always gets overpriced listings and then I end up having a reduction. Like, I want to be the agent that has a property that sells probably more, or at least asking price, and it gets closed faster and it doesn't sit on the market for weeks or months and months at a time. As a seller, I think they always think that their property is worth way more than what the comps say otherwise. So it is our job. I feel like I would be more respected if I refuse to take a listing than kind of like fold and say, okay, fine, I'll take it because I don't want to lose the listing. I'd rather say, you know what, in the event that you can work with somebody who told you you can get this amount of money, and if it doesn't sell, then you can always come back to me. But unfortunately, as a professional, it wouldn't be fair for me to take a property I know I'm not gonna even get showings, no matter what. maybe somebody's going to be curious. Nowadays, like, we don't even get showings when it's overpriced because people are like, forget it, like this is way overpriced. And some buyers don't want to offend the seller by offering less. Even though you want them to offer, they're not going to because they don't want to offend the seller. And I think we all have been in that position in the past with our clients. Yeah, so I think, let's see. There's some questions. Let me just see the chat. Is the reimbursement paid to the agent or the broker? Fran, what do you think? You're on mute, sorry.
The reimbursement has to go to the broker, but it can be paid as a pass-through, okay, without, charging the commission split on it. That's what I think.
Yeah. If you're charging them for the hourly rate, then it does have to go through the brokerage. But if it's expenses where you fronted the money for the photography and the MLS fee because we charge you, then yes, but it should be payable to the brokerage. Does that answer your question? I hope it does. Okay. Any other questions? So, just to recap everything, listing fees, how are you going to enforce it? You have to do it from the beginning. When you're taking an offer, if it doesn't say it on the offer and you didn't get the cooperating broker to broker agreement, you're going to return it back to the buyer's agent and request it that is the only way this is going to work, is if the agreement you have between you and the seller is 2% minus whatever the listing fee is. And I have to say, like, the two issues that I resolved that I was able to get the listing fee is, they have their policy, but we also have our own policy. We allow you guys to collect and pay. So you just want to make sure if you're making any changes to any type of contract, don't do it verbally. You have to have it initialed by both sides, no matter what type of contract, even if it's not about the listing, if it's the date, the price, deposits, any terms, whether it's on the rental or sale, you must have it initialed by both parties. Do not just let it pass by because you are so happy you got that offer that you just want to move on to the next. It's very, very important. On the real estate compliance, on the commission side, it's very important that you need to have it initialed. Any type of changes. In the past, we used to do that. I think now that we do things electronically, it's so much just easier to bypass it. You must include the initials. Do not even let it go to attorney review without getting both sides initialing it. Well, too bad. Sometimes like, oh, I don't want to have my buyer or seller resign. Too bad. It's a valid contract. It's not like you're passing candy. This is a financial contract that it will affect one or the other party. So make sure, and if you're on the listing side and you're making a counter, have the buyer's agent resubmit the offer, the counter offer that you have presented. Don't be the one to make the change. Have them resubmit it, and then you'll have your seller sign it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Last thing before I forget, our apple picking family event is on September 21st. We sent out the invitation. I'm going to just show you really quickly where you can find I'm going to share my screen really quick in case that you didn't see the email or the text. This is our hub. You're going to go to New Jersey and then scroll at the bottom. This is the invitation. So you can register right off from the hub. You're only allowed 5 people. So you could add the adults, kids under 16. Okay, so 5 tickets per agent. We look forward to having you guys there. And if you have any questions, reach out to your office manager. But as you guys know, we had a great time last year, so we look forward to this year as well.
Sounds
Thank you,
great.
everyone. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.